David, thank you very much for turning up.
My
Welcome.
pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
Now, you are the director of Nowhere Boys, the movie.
I am indeed.
How did you get this job?
I don't know exactly. I try and watch a lot of any new Australian show that comes out. I watch a bit of it, so I was familiar with the show. And I was kind of surprised by it because I've known Tony Ayres for over 20 years, and we're quite good friends, and we go out to dinner and talk a lot, and I'm used to him making these sort of very important films about his background and about his life, and quite political films usually. And then when I found out he was doing this show, I was quite intrigued, so I watched it, and we went out to dinner, and we talked about it, and he told me about how much he loves comics and genre stuff and science fiction in particular. And so we were just talking about it, nothing, that was a while ago. And then earlier this year, they contacted me and said, would you be interested in, we want to make a film of it to sort of end a certain part of the story. And I said, well, as is my want, can I read the script first? And they said, of course. And I read the script and I liked it, and here we are.
Right. Because this is basically the roundup of series 1 and 2 of Nowhere Boys.
Yeah. Though it is a standalone story.
It does stand alone
Yeah.
because there's a very smart, very efficiently composed introduction to the story.
Yeah. Which we a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and about 1,000 versions of that exist.
Just a quick challenge to you.
Yeah.
In approximately 25 words, could you give us a synopsis of the concept of Nowhere Boys?
Nowhere Boys is about the idea that we exist in the universe full of parallel versions of reality, and that a group of boys unwittingly break through into different versions of this reality. And it's the story of them going to a different world and them trying to come back. That's basically the overarching story.
Okay,
yeah.
and the film takes up the point where they have come back.
Yep, they have come back, and it's kind of, I see it as kind of a rock and roll movie. It's like a band, they've had this adventure, they've gone on tour, and they got, they struggle with each other, and they've sort of split up. And it's kind of the last tour, almost, and they have to get together for one last big gig.
Now, David, what is your approach when you're making a film like
Yeah.
this? Because you make a film like Mullet,
Yeah.
which is obviously it's a beautiful film, still stands as one of the best Australian films of the last 20 years.
Thank you very much.
Opinion.
Well, I'll take it.
Adore that film.
Thank
But
you.
a very personal film.
Yes.
When you're doing something like this,
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing TV shows, is it a different approach? Is it more a director for hire approach where certain performance targets need to be hit, where you've got a set job to do, where you can't kind of deviate too much from a given strategy, a given creative plan? Is that the case with a film like this?
Look, it's all of that. It's all of that. I mean, like, obviously you have to work within the parameters of what exists. But at the same time, I feel like I have to find my own way into it. I had to find what, for me, the heart for the film was for me. And I guess I was really interested in the idea, in this story in particular, about that idea of the way magic exists in the lives of kids, and that sort of the concept of them going from being kids into adults, and they have to give up the magic, and I approached it from that, and that was my way into it. That was my thematic approach to it. And so all my pre-production, all my planning, all my consultations on the script and planning shots and directing performance and everything was based around the idea of trying to capture that, the sense of that bittersweet moment when you get to a certain point in your life where you have to be an adult from now on and you have to give up stuff. And that was how I approached it. And the fact that I have to give up incredible magical powers was neither here nor there for me. The thing was, they had to stop being one thing to become another, and it's kind of bittersweet. Yeah.
But I take it you are given limitations, that there are certain things that given that you're coming into a pre-existing...
Exactly. And I tried to be very reverential to that. I didn't want it to be like, okay, and here's a thing that looks like a Russian sort of existentialist version of that, and it just happens to have the same characters in it. We wanted to sort of be, continue on a certain lot, so that it was recognisably part of that world, but we wanted to make it bigger. So one of the things that occurred to me when I went through all the previous 26 episodes quite extensively was that sort of idea of the way the spells work. And it was kind of, and the way they were kind of these sort of glyphs and symbols, and they reminded me of maps. And so I had this sort of idea in my head of looking down on things, and the idea of the circle. And so I sort of constructed a lot of it with this idea of these overhead shots looking straight down. Just because it felt like that was mapping their world, kind of on an external level for the environment, but also an internal level for the spells and the magic.
I did want to ask you, did you use drone cameras?
We did indeed.
What was it like using drone cameras?
Look, do you know what? I said, I want to use drones, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have a drone there, and like, let's just get the drone out, And it was like, turned into this hugely complicated thing, because to pilot a drone camera, you have to have a real helicopter's license, and you have to have these other special, and not just a helicopter's license, you have to have all these other licenses as well. So it's actually really expensive. I thought it was going to be this really, we'll get a $800 drone, stick a GoPro on it, and off we go. But it was incredibly complicated, and it was like we ended up only having 2 half days for the whole shoot for the drone. So I had to be really conscious about constructing the way I thought, because I had like about 50 shots in mind, and I got them all, but it was very complicated to try and fit that into these 2 half days.
Was it more complicated than it was worth?
No,
okay.
No.
So at the end of the day, drone cameras are worth
I love them. I'm thinking about going to get a license to try and do it myself, because I've always been interested in that idea of mapping space, and in one of my earlier films, Idiot Box, I did it all the way through that film. And we did it with, a very expensive drone, a helicopter, and 35mm cameras, and all that sort of stuff. But I love that way technology is freeing us up. I love the way, I really enjoyed the way they use mobile phones in a film like Tangerine. And I just think that sort of, for want of a better word, that democratization of filmmaking by the technology opening up and being able to get these shots you just couldn't get before.
Now, when you're shooting a film like Nowhere Boys, you know that it's going to get a limited release in cinemas, but it's ultimately going to be on TV.
Yeah.
There's a set date already.
Yes.
So, David, when you're shooting it, is TV foremost in mind, or is cinema foremost in mind?
It's no, you know what? I'm thinking more about the story, and to me, part of the thing we're thinking about is scale. And it used to be something when I started out doing, 25 years ago, when I started directing at Crawford's, and I was doing stuff for a TV that was like 20 inches across, and I'd already made a feature, my first feature about the same time, which was designed for the cinema. It was very different. But now when people got 60, 70-inch TVs at home, and I went and saw a film that I really loved called The Lobster the other day, and it was in a cinema, and the screen was much bigger than that. So what the difference is between cinema and TV is, I think, getting very blurry.
It really is overlapping now.
It really is. So where you would consciously do really big close-ups on everything, in TV, you don't have to do that anymore, because TVs are much sharper, and so, because the risk was you would lose seeing people's eyes, and the networks would freak out, and all that, if you couldn't see the character's eyes for whatever. But now it's much more flexible, and there's less of those sort of strictures on you.
Yeah, certainly when you see, just to digress for a moment, when you see big miniseries like Game of Thrones, like Mad Men, there's a lot of
very cinematic
panache put into these shows, which you couldn't do otherwise.
And there are people who have got like home cinema setups with screens that are 4 meters across, watching Game of Thrones. Now there's these new 4K TVs and stuff, which are much higher resolution than what they show in the cinemas. So it's kind of this. I get it. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a sucker for that sort of technology.
Now, just quickly, just for the record,
Yeah.
I know you didn't have a huge effects budget,
Yeah.
for this film. The effects look okay in this movie, given what the film is. However, I got to just ask you about. There's a scene early on where the girl is filming, and on the iPhone, and the image is just. I mean, it's not fitting properly onto the phone, and obviously it's a motion track thing. Someone didn't motion track the phone with the image you were putting on. What happens when you see that in a movie? What is that telling us? That you didn't have time, that you ran out of money to do it, or no one noticed?
Look, no, it's just not. You know, I don't think there's a single scene in this film that doesn't have some level of CGI. That scene you're talking about, that has about 8 different levels of CGI. There's something like 80 scenes in this. So we're talking. Look, I'm not making excuses, but we've got a lot.
It's a small moment.
It is a small moment, and you know, like it's like my general feeling about filmmaking is, at the end of the day, would I like to have more money and more time? Yes, but do I believe the characters in that moment, even if it's a moment about magic and about sort of parallel universes and stuff? To me, that's my main priority, and that's where I put most of my emphasis. And it's like, do I believe them?
The cast in the film do their job quite well.
Yeah.
Then Angourie Rice steps into the frame. Is it my imagination, or does she have a large pink and purple neon sign hovering above her head that says "Next Big Thing"?
Oh, look, I was, you know, like,
she steals the film.
She's like 4 foot nothing. She's tiny, and she's sort of, and I wanted to get this idea of this character, this prepubescent girl, who's kind of fluctuating between being sort of sulky and cranky and being sort of the destroyer of the universe. And you know, like, she pulls it off, and everybody, I'm amazed that everyone goes, she's so tiny. I thought she was really big, you know, and that sense of scale that she brings, just in terms of performance, she was fantastic to work with. I saw her first in
Final Hours?
The Final Hours, and I thought she was really great in that. And she's apparently she's in a new film with Ryan Gosling in America, and she's just done Jasper Jones' film, just finished filming now here, which is another really interesting film, Australian film about to come out. So she is that.
Did she do this before her American trip, or
no?
after?
Just after.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I knew her from somewhere, but she was just amazing in that we did, and she came in for screen tests, and we saw like 30 girls for that role, and she was fabulous. And we got, I mean, you know, there was another 3 or 4 girls that we thought were really good too that we did callbacks on, but she just was amazing, and she just really holds her own. Yeah. And because I really wanted to keep her that sort of weird combination of that 13-year-old going on 1,000-year-old demon, which she does fabulously.